Words that we never hear in Africa is one nation, under God. But apparently you hear this in Eastern Europe. Well, that's according to the interview with Tucker Carlson and Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary.
So Viktor Orban is a very interesting character. He's been Prime Minister since 2010. He's considered to be a far-right guy by the US. But fundamentally, he is what we call a statesman, a patriot, someone who cares about the people that he serves. He had an interview with Tucker Carlson that was released, and based on that interview, it gave me a few ideas about what we can hope to achieve in South Africa. So firstly, let's talk about what he sees as Hungarian.
And to be Hungarians we are very proud of it. We love the nation, we love the country, and we are proud of it. It's not very much mainstream thinking, political thinking of today Western societies, but in Hungary we are still very patriotic and Christian and committed to that values, not in an ideological level, but on the streets every day.
Hungary is a patriotic society, not an ideological society. So ideological societies, especially in Eastern Europe, were specifically driven by, well, communism, because communism was a disease in Eastern Europe that rotted the brain of many. And when communism retreated, Eastern Europe was, well, in ruins. Now, to actually come back and revitalize Eastern Europe, they've had to go through and basically revitalize what it means to be Eastern European. And for doing this, for promoting their country first and the rest of the world second, I mean, Hungary is very well known to say, if you're foreign, piss off, which we should do. But for doing that, they've basically been shunned by the European Union and many international organizations as being authoritarian and deeply far-right and ideological driven.
Yeah, and the funny thing is he talks about ideology, and this is what he says.
Politics very often led by intellectuals. And the intellectuals like to be ideologists, a special approach from the ideological point of view. And you know, ideology is a very difficult thing because it has an exclusivity. So when the liberal says that this is the interpretation of society, it means that this is the only way to interpret the society. If you do differently, you cannot be a good man. So we have another interpretation. We have a Christian and national, more traditional interpretation of human being and society. But they can't accept it because it's different. So we are plural, they are hegemonistic. That's the problem.
And as you can see, he says ideology is driven by intellectuals. And it reminds me dramatically of South Africa, the country we live in. One can't say that the government is deeply intellectual. In fact, they're the opposite. They're quite retarded. But at the heart of it, the ANC, which runs this country, is still deeply wedded to communist ideals. And they're trying to thrust the entire social order of South Africa into that particular ideology. And Viktor Orban says this is a great mistake to make when trying to run a country. You run a country for the benefit of its people, not for the benefit of your narrow self-interests. He calls out Western Europe, he calls out America, but I think it's also a symptom right here in South Africa.
Interestingly enough, though, he doesn't actually highlight it as being a communist problem. He actually highlights it as being a liberal Western problem. And that's actually kind of true. And he, as he rightly says, those ideas are often pushed forward by intellectuals. In other words, people that don't really sit on the ground floor. And we see this in South Africa, people like Patel, who's never run a business in his life. He's a trade unionist, but he's the guy in charge of basically creating law that's supposed to make the world more business friendly. We see this in a number of instances where you've got individuals that have never spent a day in their actual industries or their portfolios, basically creating the policy around those portfolios. And then when they die, they're like, oh, I don't understand how this works. How did that all go wrong? And Viktor Orban addresses this with Tucker, and he says the problem with these individuals is that they almost act in an exclusive manner. It's me, it's me, it's me, it's my thoughts. And if you challenge them, as he rightly says, if you have a different view from them, they don't go, oh, that's interesting. They go, you're not a good man.
And in terms of understanding why that is, Viktor Orban has an answer as well. And he says, in other parts of the world, the cult of the individual human is key.
It's not according to ideologies. It's deeper. It has an anthropological character. So on one side, in Europe and probably in your country, but in Europe definitely, there are groups of people who think that the most important thing of the world is their ego, themselves, me. This is the center of the world. The other camp of the people, the other part of the society thinks that it's not true. Because there are certain things which are more important than me, than my ego. Family, nation, God. And because they are more important than me, I have to serve these higher level things. So this society has a majority here in Hungary. And the other society, which is concentrating only me, only dealing with myself, it's more westernized, dominating factor of the political life. And the governments of the West, more belonging to the first group of the people. I belong to the second one, and Hungary belongs to the second one.
Because South Africa is such a violent, disorderly place, we really have no reason to go out and try build stuff outside with other people. We try to sort of keep to ourselves. We're quite atomistic. We're quite individualistic. And that's what keeps us down at the end of the day. And Orban says, in Hungary, we've taken the opposite approach. We are A, Hungarians. B, we have the same virtues and values. C, we all believe God. And most importantly, now that we have a solid foundation on who we are, we can actually do things that benefit us collectively. But in the West and in South Africa, if you're all atomized individuals, there's nothing that binds us together whatsoever. How on earth are you going to have a strategy for the future of the country if the people living next door to each other don't even know who they are?
Very important, because a lot of these individuals want to immigrate to Western Europe, and we've discussed this on many, many instances. But South Africa as a whole has certain values that, to be honest, Western Europe does not share. The first is that it's very family orientated. Your family's key. A lot of people in Western Europe don't actually share those values. I mean, work is first, and then it's the house, and then the family. The kids are looked after by the daycare center and the school, and then they have after-school activities. Like, the family is not king in those countries. The state is king. The second is that in South Africa, it's still a deeply Christian country. I mean, churches are all over the show. I mean, I know where I live, there's a bloody church every second street. In the UK, it's the fastest growing atheistic country in the world. And we see similar trends right up and down Europe. But with that atheism comes almost a degree of nihilism, in which case I believe for nothing. So the actual idea that individuals have any form of moral value or any form of agency disappears. They're just another number in the state. You're just ID number 1111233. It's very deeply anti-humanistic. And so what Orban says is that in order to regain the dignity or the humanity of his people, he has to re-engineer the family love of God, specifically the Christian God, which is what his nation was founded on. As South Africans, we can all identify with that. And he says, once you have that, you have family and belief in God, and you have the love of God and the love of family, you can build a nation around those two ideas, his nation being the Hungarian nation. And you know what, Ramon, we could do that here in South Africa, because regardless of whether you're white, Indian, colored, black, doesn't matter. We all have families, we all love our families, and we all believe in God. And majority of people in South Africa believe in the Christian God, which means we actually have a lot more led to believe.
Yeah, much more, much more. And that's a characteristic of this particular channel. We keep saying South Africans agree on 8 out of 10 things for the most part. The battle for South Africa is either between unity or individualism. We have Western-funded NGOs who are very liberal, who want us alone and atomized. We have a government that's ideological, that wants us oppressed in different classes that don't really exist in the first place. The only solution is to ignore all those bastards, become more like Hungary, understand that we like each other and believe each other and have the same values as each other more than anyone else. And once that happens, you can actually make South Africa pretty great. And Hungary is a great example of that. Devastated by communism over a century, now it's one of the shining lights in Eastern Europe.